Okay, so it is time for my June TBR, and excuse me, I'm very excited to be getting to this TBR because the month of May for me was a really good month. In saying that, I have a ton of books that I'm midway through the series of, so a lot of my TBR for June is going to be continued series. In saying that, I will read some blurbs and you guys can get to know a little bit about what's going to go on in that book. Let's get to it with the first book I'm going to be reading in the month of June. So the first book I'm going to be reading in the month of June 2020 is the continued Harry Potter series next book. It is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Now this is the fifth book in the Harry Potter series. I read books 1, 2, 3 and 4 in each of the weeks. So in week 1 I read 1, in week 2 I read 2, in week 3 I read 3, and week 4 I read 4 of Harry Potter in May. So in June, I'm going to finish off the series. So in week 1 of June, I'm going to read book 5, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. This is a young adult fantasy. The books transition from being middle grade to being young adult from the book prior to this one, the fourth book, The Goblet of Fire. This book is 766 pages long, which is a massive chunker. It is the biggest book in the series and probably the biggest book that I've ever read, potentially rivaling Miss Bourne, we'll have to see. But that makes this a tome and a quarter. So a tome is 500 pages. This is 766. So it's a tome and a quarter. So it's going to be a lot. It's going to take a lot to get through, but it's the first book I'm going to read in the month of June. First book I'll read in week 1 of June 2020. So for the second book that I'm going to be reading in June of 2020, my wonderful bookstore that I spoke to you guys about in my May TBR, they put in some more free books into my delivery, which is just so amazing of them. And I did some research on the books that they put in, and the book that I selected was this one. It is called The Last Smile in Sunder City, and it's by Luke Arnold. This is an adult fantasy mystery, so there you go. It's 318 pages long, which makes it a half tome, and I'm kind of excited to read this. I'm happy that it's not too many pages, considering how many pages Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix is. Speaking of, I did not read the blurb for this book, so here we go. Harry Potter's due to start his 5th year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. He is desperate to get back to school and find out why his friends Ron and Hermione have been so secretive all summer. However, what Harry is about to discover in his new year at Hogwarts will turn his world upside down. I'm glad that really gave away next to nothing, and I'm so glad for it because, yeah, otherwise it would be a spoiler. So that's the blurb for this book. So to the blurb for The Last Smile in Sunder City, and it says, I'm Fetch Phillips. Just like it says on the window, there are 3 things you should know before you hire me. 1, sobriety costs extra. 2, my services are confidential. 3, I don't work for humans. Ooh. It's nothing personal, I'm human myself, but after what happened to all the magic, it's not the humans who need my help. This blurb is so intriguing, and I can't wait to get started on this book once I finish Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. And in case I didn't mention it, this is an adult book. It's an adult fantasy mystery. The final book I'm going to read for the first week of June 2020 is one that's been talked about so much that dash it all, I've got to read this book so I can give my own opinion on it. Sometimes this works out for me when books are talked about so much and I end up enjoying reading these books thanks to all the recommendations that I get, and sometimes they don't work out, but we're going to see how we go with this one. It is Leigh Bardugo's The Six of Crows. This is the first book in the Grishaverse series. So this is a YA fantasy. It is 491 pages long, which is a half tome technically, but also technically it's only 9 pages away from being a tome. So it's still a pretty decent size for a book. I do apologize about the glare with this version. The Six of Crows is written in red and it's a bit glary, so I do apologize about that. But let's read the blurb, shall we? Criminal prodigy Kaz Brecker has been offered a chance at a deadly heist. Break into the Ice Court, a military stranglehold that's never been breached, and retrieve a hostage whose knowledge could change Grisha magic forever. To succeed would mean riches beyond Kaz's wildest dreams, but he can't pull it off alone. Ooh, so can't wait to read this and give my opinion on what I think about this very popular series, the Grishaverse, with the first book, The Six of Crows. This will be the final book that I read in week 1 of June 2020. So to the fourth book I'm going to be reading in the month of June, and the first book I'm going to read in week 2 of June 2020. Before I reveal this book, I want you to know something. I had the complete works of this series that I'm currently reading, but unfortunately I lost some of them, and now that I'm rereading, I've realized that I lost the last 2, so I had to get them replaced, and the original series covers weren't available for me to purchase anymore, which is a little bit sad. And in fact, the cover of this book is really scary as far as I'm concerned. So I just wanted to give you that heads up before I show you the book. The book I am going to be reading for the first book I'm going to read in the second week of June 2020, and the fourth book I'm going to read for June is J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. This is the cover that I have. It is very, very different to anything else that I've seen, but it was the only available book for Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince that I could get during this lockdown. But once I am able to replace this with the original UK version, because I love the original UK version artistry, I will be doing that. In the meantime, that's what this book is. So you can see it on the cover. Very different, but you can still see the title. So this book is the 6th book in the Harry Potter series. It is a YA fantasy, and this version of that book is 542 pages long, which makes it a tome, and I'm very much looking forward to getting back into the Harry Potter world. Now, I don't know if there is a blurb on this book, so I'm just going to check that out. So there isn't a blurb that comes with this book. On the back, you have a picture and a quote, but I don't want to read the quote because it is a spoiler. So what I can say from memory of this book, which it's been a while, is that this book, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, follows our protagonist Harry Potter going into his 6th year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, where a new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher has been hired, and there is more to this Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher that meets the eye. It's a very interesting book, and I'll talk more about it when I review it, but this will be the first book that I read in week 2 of June 2020, and the 4th book that I'm going to read for June 2020. So to the next book, which is the second book that I'm going to be reading for week 2 for June 2020, and the 5th book in total. This is a book that I actually received from my dad and my stepmom for my birthday, and it is a very popular book, and the idea surrounding this book just sounds so amazing, so let's get right to it. It is called Scythe, and it is written by Neil Shusterman. Now, this is part of a series, but I have to admit that I don't know off the top of my head what the series is called, but I think it's... actually, no, I don't know. It is part of a series though. Anyway, so this book is a YA dystopian. For those of you who don't know, dystopians are, generally speaking, they are books that are set in worlds where a tyrant is leading this world, and there is some sort of a caste or class system somehow associated with that world that breaks everyone up into what the tyrant wants them to be in. So an example of a dystopian system could be in Harry Potter when it comes to class system. It could be in Harry Potter the Hogwarts houses. Now, that's not necessarily classes, but as in a caste system, but it does break them up into different groups. Another example could be the Divergent series with the factions. Another example is Hunger Games with all of the districts. It goes on and on. So, Scythe is a YA dystopian, and it is 448 pages long, which again makes it a half tome, but it's only 52 pages away from being a full tome. So let's read the blurb. Thou shalt kill. Ooh. What if death was the only thing left to control? In a perfect world, the only way to die is to be gleaned by a professional scythe. When Citra and Rowan are chosen to be apprentice scythes, they know they have no option but to learn the art of killing. However, the terrifying responsibility of choosing their victims is just the start. Corruption is the order of the day, and Citra and Rowan need to stick together to fight it. Then they are told that one of them will have to glean the other. Ooh, so I'm very intrigued by this because it is a book that is literally narrated by death, and you don't need to say more to me because that just sounds so interesting. So this is the 5th book I'm going to read for June 2020. The 2nd book I'm going to read in week 2 of June 2020. So the 6th book I'm going to read in June 2020 is again continuing on with a series that I have the series that I'm reading, but I only started that series this month in May. So the first book in this series is called The Hunger Games, and I really enjoyed that, and I'll talk more about that in my May monthly wrap-up. So the second book is called Catching Fire. So this is Catching Fire by Susan Collins. It is a YA dystopian, another dystopian, and it is 448 pages long, which makes it a half tome. So just like with Scythe, it's the exact same amount of pages. So 52 pages away from being a tome. Let's read the back. Sparks are igniting, flames are separating, and the capital wants revenge. Against all odds, Katniss has won the Hunger Games. She and fellow District 12 tribute Peter Malark are miraculously still alive. Katniss should be relieved, happy even. After all, she has returned to her family and her longtime friend Gale. Yet nothing is the way Katniss wishes it to be. Gale holds her at an icy distance. Peter has turned his back on her completely, and there are whispers of a rebellion against the capital, a rebellion that Katniss and Peter may have helped create. There is more, but I'm not going to read more because I don't want to spoil it too much for myself, but I loved the original book, The Hunger Games, so much. I haven't read or seen anything to do with Hunger Games until last month when I read the original book, The Hunger Games, because there was just so much that it was a very popular series and people talked about it way too much that it kind of turned me off wanting to know anything about the series. Now that the hype has died down, I thought it would be the perfect time to pick it up in May, pick up the first book, and I really, really enjoyed it. And so that's why I'm moving on to book number 2, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes of it. So that completes what I'm going to be reading for the first 2 weeks, the first half of June 2020. Let's move on to the second half, shall we? The 7th book I'm going to read in June 2020 and the first book I'm going to read in week 3 of June 2020 is the next Harry Potter book. Again, the cover, I apologize, there's nothing I could do about it, but it is called Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. So this is the final book in the Harry Potter series. It is a YA fantasy. As I said, books 4, 5, 6, and 7 are YA, and this version is 640 pages long, which makes it a tome. So it's going to be a long book to read. Again, because it is this version, there is a quote on the back that I don't want to read because it will spoil too much. So all I will say is, this is Harry's 7th year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, but something is stopping him from going back to school. What is it? And why is it so very life-threateningly important that he actually don't go back to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in his 7th year? And I will leave it at that to not spoil too many things, but this is the 7th book that I'll read in June 2020, and the first book I'll read in week 3 of June 2020. So to the second book I'm going to be reading in week 3 of June 2020 and the 8th book in total for this month. And this is the second book in a series that I started a couple of months ago that I loved so much. The only reason that I didn't read the second book last month was because I had to get this book ordered in. I had to get it in from the US. So it took a little while to get here, but I'm so happy that it's here and that I finally get to read it. The first book is called Steelheart. You may remember me doing my review on that one. The second book to the Steelheart, second book after Steelheart in the Reckoners series is Firefight by Brandon Sanderson. I'm really excited to read this because the first book was so amazing. It is a sci-fi superhero story, the first one was, and I'm not really a fan of superhero stories or films, anything to do with Marvel. It's just not my cup of tea. No judgment, it's just not my kind of thing. But because Steelheart was written by Brandon Sanderson, my all-time favourite author at the moment, I thought I would give it a go, and I went in actually not knowing it was a superhero series and came out loving the first book so much that I just had to read the second book. So let's read the blurb. So it says, they told David it was impossible, that even the Reckoners had never killed a high epic. Yet, Steelheart, invincible, immortal, unconquerable, is dead, and he died by David's hand. Eliminating Steelheart was supposed to make life more simple. Instead, it only made David realize he has questions, big ones, and there's no one in New Cargo who can give him the answers he needs. Now, there is more to the blurb, and I invite you to check that out online if you would like to read more, but I don't want to spoil myself anymore. I'm already way too intrigued and motivated to read this that I don't want any more spoilers, but very excited to read this one, and it will, as I said, be the second book I read in week 3 of June 2020, making this the 8th book that I read in June. But before I put this book away, I just wanted to give a big thank you to my niece, because my niece actually bought this book for my birthday. So thank you very, very much for buying this one for me, and I'll let you know how I go with it. Thank you again. So the final book I'm going to be reading in week 3 of June 2020, and the 9th book that I'm going to read in June, is the third book in a series that I'm reading that I love so much. It is a YA dystopian, and I loved this book. The first book is The Selection, and you can check out my review of that if you would like. The second book was The Elite. You can check out that review as well, both of them in my playlist. The third book in the Selection series is this one. It is called The One, The One, by Kiera Cass. So the first book was a lot of fun and happiness and joy, and the second book was wow. Like, Kiera Cass just went above and beyond in the second one and really went there with certain scenes and really shocked me with what she did. But the basic premise of this series is that it revolves around the protagonist, there she is on the cover, America Singer, who has entered into a kind of a bachelor-style situation where the bachelor is actually the prince of the kingdom that they live in, and whoever wins this is going to become the princess and marry the prince. But it is so much more than that, despite the fact that we get princess lessons and that potential princesses are being eliminated here, there, and everywhere throughout the first 2 books. The world is in chaos. This world is in chaos at the moment, so there's a lot going on with that. I'm not going to read the blurb because I don't want to spoil it for myself at all, and I have been told that it does spoil it, but this is the third book in that series. She's still going through the process. I think it's going to take a while to get through this process, so we'll see how we go, but very, very excited to read this book because the first book got 5 stars from me, and so did the second book, and the second book was even better, so we'll see how we go with the third one. On to week 4 of June then, and the first book that I'm going to be reading in week 4, which therefore makes it the 10th book that I'm going to be reading in June of 2020, is the second book in a series that I started this month in May, a YA dystopian. The book that I started in May, the series that I started in May, the first book, is called Divergent. I have seen the film a few times but never read the book, and I love the book. I'll talk more to you about that in my May wrap-up, but because of how much I loved it, I had to go directly onto the second book this month, and that is this book, Insurgent by Veronica Roth. So this is a YA dystopian, and it is 525 pages long, which makes it a tome. Just quickly, jumping in with the one, it is 323 pages long, which makes it a half tome. And I'm just really excited to get into this book and read it again. Not read it again, sorry, and to continue reading with this series. So let's read what it says on the back. It says, Triss is the protagonist, has survived a brutal attack on her former home and family, but she has paid a terrible price. Racked with grief and guilt, she becomes ever more reckless as she struggles to accept her new future. Again, I don't want to read too much of this, but in the first book, for those of you who want to know if this is the kind of book for you, basically it starts off with the children who have come of age. They go and do some testing to see which faction they should live in, because the world that they live in this series, everyone is divided into one faction or another. There are 5 of them, and this test that she does is meant to show her which faction they recommend that she choose, because on the day that you go to the faction that you're meant to go to, you yourself get to choose which one you go to, but the test is just advising you, this is the one we think will suit you best. She comes out of the test, and the test is inconclusive. There is not one faction that seems to be the right one for her. There are multiple that would suit her really well, which makes her a divergent, and there are people in that world who are afraid of divergence because they don't have a one-track mind. But it was just so amazing. She went from the faction that she had been raised in. She then chose to go to another faction, which doesn't happen that much at all. And yeah, she got to learn about that faction and things that went on there. So it was an amazing book, and I definitely recommend it to anyone who likes dystopians, anyone who likes action-packed books, because it was very action-packed pretty much from the get-go. And this is the second book, obviously, in that series, and the first book that I'm going to read in the 4th week of June 2020, which makes it the 10th book I'm going to read in June. So we get to the 11th book I'm going to read in June, which is the book I'm going to read second in the 4th week of June, and this book is continuing on with a series that I've been reading for many, many, many months now. In fact, this is the 5th book in a 6-book series. This is number 5 there, and yes, you can see it is Vampire Academy's 5th book, known as Spiritbound by Rochelle Mead. So this is a YA paranormal book, and it is 489 pages long, which makes it a half tome, but it's only 11 pages away from being a tome. So again, I don't want to spoil too much about this book, because again, this is very deep into a series, but in case you're wondering, is this the type of series that I should be getting into? I will say, first of all, I'll say one word: vampires. If you're into vampires, you'll love this. It's basically, the series starts off as a kind of like Harry Potter, but instead of it being a world of witches and wizards, it's a world of vampires, and instead of being Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, it's Vampire Academy, the school for royal vampires and those who are training to become guardians who are going to protect them. The royal vampires, not only are they vampires, but they also, each royal vampire, known as Moroi, they have an ability to do things with one element when it comes to magic. So they might be an earth user, air, fire, water, or spirit, which is much less commonly known. So these books follow the protagonist, Rose Hathaway, who is training to become a guardian of her best friend Vasilisa Dragomir, who is a royal Moroi, who is a spirit user, and yeah, it's a really intriguing series. So this is the second last book in that series, and I'm looking forward to getting to reading it. And so we get to the final book I'm going to read in week 4 of June 2020, and the final book I'm going to read in June, the 12th book I'm going to read in June, and it is the 5th book in my favourite series so far, the Mistborn series. If you've been watching my channel, there'll be no surprise to you that I end every single month with the Vampire Academy book that I'm up to as my second last book, and the Mistborn book I'm up to with the last one. And the 5th book in the Mistborn series out of 6 is Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson. So this is an adult fantasy book. It is 383 pages long, which makes it a half tome. The first 3 books in the Mistborn series are much longer than the second 3 books, and I've just started reading the 4th book at time of filming of this series, and it is very different because it's set 300 years into the future. So we have the first trilogy and then the second trilogy. I am not going to spoil this at all. All I'm going to say is if you love magic and you want to read a book that is a series that is highly action-packed with many dramatic scenes and magic is at the forefront of everything that is going on, you will, and if you like dystopians as well, I guess, you will love Mistborn. I'm yet to hear anyone walk away from at least reading the first book, Mistborn: The Final Empire, and saying that they were disappointed. Brandon Sanderson is such an amazingly talented writer that it's so easy to get lost in his world, and whenever I put down any of the first 3 books that I have read in this series, I found myself going back and thinking about them and being obsessed with them till I pick them up again. They're just so good. So I'm not going to advertise it any more other than saying if you like magic, if you like dystopians, you're going to love Mistborn, because anyone who's read it, I haven't heard anyone yet say, at least with book 1, that they hated it. Everyone that's read it so far says it's the most amazing thing they've read, so I definitely recommend that you read it yourself, spoiler-free, read it yourself, and then let me know what you think. But Shadows of Self will be the final book that I read in June of 2020. So, these are the first 6 books that I'm going to be reading in June of 2020. And these are the second 6 books that I'm going to be reading in June of 2020. Now, as per usual, I always like to end my TBRs by discussing what I'm going to read in week 1 and the days and that kind of thing, in case you wanted to buddy read along with me. So I'm going to be starting off my first week of June, as I've already said, with reading Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Because this is 766 pages long, there is no way I'm going to get through it in 3 days. Even if I really try my hardest, it's just not going to happen. So I'm going to be reading this on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then when I do my midweek vlog, I'll talk about how I enjoyed this book or how I didn't enjoy this book. But this is what I'll read from Monday to Thursday. Then Thursday and Friday, I'm going to read The Last Smile in Sunder City by Luke Arnold. And then on Saturday and Sunday, well, hopefully, maybe even towards the end of Friday as well, Saturday and Sunday, I'll read Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, the first book in the Grisha-verse series. So if you would like to buddy read along with me, then feel free. I would love to hear your thoughts as we read along with these 3 books, starting off with Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Monday to Thursday. The Last Smile in Sunder City would be Thursday and Friday, I suppose, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Six of Crows. Alright, so have you read any of these books? What did you think? Let me know, spoiler free, in the space below. And if any of these books motivate you to, if any of the books I brought up in this TBR have motivated you to pick up 1 or more of these books to read in June of 2020, let me know in the comments below and let me know how you go while you're reading them. It'd be great to chat with you guys about all the books that I have here on my June TBR. Alright, well that is where I'm going to leave it. I'm going to let you guys go. Peace, blessings, and so much love. Mwah. I post videos every Monday, Thursday, and Sunday, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Happy reading, and I'll see you at the end of June with a wrap-up of all these books. Till then, bye guys, bye.